Welcome, friends. Are you sitting comfortably? I hope so, because tonight's tale will take you deep into the heart of the Scottish Highlands, where the wind howls like a mournful spirit and the ancient hills hold secrets older than memory itself. This is a story of terror, of restless souls, and of a chilling discovery that will make you question what is real and what is not. So, settle in, but don't get too comfortable, because this story might just follow you into your dreams. The Scottish Highlands are a place of breathtaking beauty, with their rolling hills, mist-shrouded valleys, and ancient forests. But beneath that beauty lies a darker side. The Highlands are steeped in history, much of it bloody and tragic. Wars, betrayals, and unspeakable acts have left their mark on the land, and some say the spirits of the past still linger, unable or unwilling to move on. Our story takes place in the dead of winter, when the Highlands are at their most desolate. The days are short, the nights long and bitterly cold. Snow blankets the ground, muffling sound and making the world feel eerily still. It was on one such winter's day that a young couple, Sarah and Tom, decided to take their dog, Max, for a walk along a remote path that wound its way through the hills. They had recently moved to a small village nearby, drawn by the promise of peace and quiet. But they were about to discover that the Highlands are anything but peaceful. The path they chose was one they hadn't explored before. It was narrow and overgrown, flanked by towering trees that seemed to close in around them as they walked. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the only sounds were the crunch of their boots on the frozen ground and the occasional bark from Max as he darted ahead. As they walked, they came across the ruins of an old stone building, half hidden by the trees. The walls were crumbling, and moss clung to the stones like a second skin. Sarah stopped and stared at the ruins, a strange feeling washing over her. "Do you think this was a church?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tom shrugged. "Could be. Looks old enough. Maybe a monastery?" They didn't know it then, but they were right. The ruins had once been a monastery, home to a small order of monks who had lived there in solitude, tending to their prayers and their simple lives. But centuries ago, their peace had been shattered when a gang of thieves descended upon the monastery, seeking treasure. The monks had no gold to give, only their lives, and the thieves took those without mercy. Legend has it that the monks were decapitated, their bodies left to rot while their heads were taken as gruesome trophies. The story of the monks was well known among the locals, but Sarah and Tom, being new to the area, had never heard it. If they had, they might have thought twice about continuing their walk. As they moved past the ruins, the atmosphere seemed to change. The air grew colder, and the forest, which had been alive with the sounds of birds and rustling leaves, fell silent. Even Max, usually so full of energy, seemed uneasy. He stayed close to Sarah and Tom, his ears pricked and his tail low. "Do you feel that?" Sarah asked, rubbing her arms as if to ward off a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Tom nodded. "Yeah, it's weird, like we're being watched." They pressed on, but the feeling of unease only grew stronger. Then, out of the corner of her eye, Sarah saw something, a shadowy figure standing among the trees. She stopped in her tracks, her heart pounding. "Tom," she whispered, "look over there." Tom followed her gaze, and his breath caught in his throat. There, barely visible through the trees, was a figure in a long, dark robe. It stood motionless, its face hidden by the shadows of its hood. "Hello?" Tom called out, his voice trembling slightly. The figure didn't move. "Maybe it's just a hiker," Sarah said, though she didn't sound convinced. Tom raised his phone and snapped a picture. The flash lit up the trees for a brief moment, and when it faded, the figure was gone. "Let's keep moving," Tom said, his voice tight. They hurried down the path, but the sense of being watched never left them. Every so often, they would catch glimpses of more figures in the trees, always robed, always still. Tom took more pictures, hoping to capture whatever it was they were seeing, but they didn't stop to investigate. By the time they reached the end of the path and returned to their car, they were both shaken. When they got home, they immediately pulled up the photos on Tom's phone. At first, they didn't see anything unusual. The trees looked just as they had in real life, dark and foreboding, but empty. Then Sarah gasped and pointed at the screen. "Look," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Tom leaned in and his blood ran cold. In the photos, the robed figures were there, just as they had seen them. But now, they could see something they hadn't noticed before. The figures had no heads. One by one, they went through the photos, and in every single one, the headless figures appeared, standing silently among the trees. That night, neither of them could sleep. They lay in bed. The images of the headless monks burned into their minds. When they finally drifted off, it was only to be plunged into a nightmare. In the dream, they were back at the ruins, but this time, they weren't alone. The monks were there, their robes stained with blood, their hands clutching at the stumps where their heads should have been. They watched in horror as the scene unfolded before them, the thieves descending upon the monastery, the monks being dragged from their prayers, their heads severed with brutal efficiency. The air was filled with the sound of screams and the sickening thud of steel on flesh. When Sarah and Tom woke, it was with a start, their hearts racing and their bodies drenched in sweat. They turned to each other, and in that moment, they knew. They had both had the same dream. To this day, they don't know what they saw in the forest or why the spirits of the monks chose to reveal themselves. But one thing is certain. They will never forget that winter's day in the Scottish Highlands, and they will never set foot on that path again. So, my friends, the next time you find yourself walking through the woods, take a moment to look around. You never know who or what might be watching. And if you see a figure in a robe standing silently among the trees, don't stop. Don't take a picture. Just run. Sweet dreams.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more.